Good evening, everybody. We apologize for the crowd, but it just shows that there's some Mustangs in the house here, I think, tonight. I am not a Mustang, though I'm the father of three, but I am here because I'm Craig Gill, and I'm the editor-in-chief at the University Press of Mississippi, and it was my great pleasure to work with these fine folks up here who are going to talk to you and with you, and y'all are going to talk some as well, I'm sure, about this book right here. Lines were drawn, remembering court-ordered integration at a Mississippi high school, and of course for this crowd, you know what high school that is, that's Murrah. So we have up here, in case you don't know, Claiborne Barksdale, Johnny Jones, Teena F, Robert Gibbs, and Alan Huffman. And these are the folks who, they're in this book along with some of y'all, and we're delighted to be here. The University Press of Mississippi is delighted to have published the book, and I want to thank our Book Friends organization for all their help with this event here, and of course, we want to thank Lemuria and all y'all for coming out. I'm going to hand this microphone over to Alan Huffman so that he can start this off, and I'm going to get out of the way so y'all can all talk.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg, for publishing the book, too. Can y'all hear me okay? I'm going to be short because obviously we've got an entire panel here. Okay, sorry. Thank you. I'm not used to using a microphone, but since there's people way back in the back, there's a large group of us up here as there are out there. So we're going to be brief in our remarks, and because we really would like to have sort of an exchange with the crowd and have questions from people who have ideas or questions about what happened. But basically the book started out as an argument between Johnny and Teena about the meaning of our high school experience. And I basically got conscripted once they realized that they had something bigger than just a debate between two friends, and that there is actually a need to put down for the record what happened in our high school and under court-ordered integration in the 70s. And so, you know, it's the kind of thing, like, we were just high school students. We weren't all on a mission, or we weren't really, I don't think, that aware of what was happening around us. I mean, you knew something was going on because we went home from school in the 9th grade, you know, and came back, and our schools were integrated when we came back. So everything had a lot of people left. And so you knew there was obviously a big upheaval going on, but I think most of us just were trying to go through high school and do the best we could and have fun. And that kind of served us well, because we ended up having really good relationships among students of different backgrounds and very, very few problems. There were isolated problems. It wasn't like a racial Shangri-La, but it wasn't a disaster either. And you know, a lot of us have remained friends in the years since then. And having reunions and still keeping in touch. And I think we all realized that we went through something important, even though we may not have been totally aware of it at the time. So we put this book together, and even though our names some of our names are on the cover of the book, we're not authors in the traditional sense, because we were basically the collectors and curators of stories that became a group memoir. And that was the whole point. You know, we asked some students, answered questionnaire, some submitted essays, and some we interviewed. And we also talked with some of the former teachers and others that were associated with us at Murrah. So I'm really glad to see a lot of you here, and a lot of other faces that probably weren't there but are interested in the topic. And what I'm hoping is that after everybody kind of gives their two bits about what we saw this book as and how it came about and what we learned from it, that you'll have questions, because we really do want to, it's a thought-provoking topic. And you know, I was telling Fred Sheriff when I was walking over here, I said, Fred was our class president, right? Was that what his title? He was a lot of things. Fred I think
Mr. Murrah
escaped out the back door when he saw the crowd. But I said to Fred, I said, you know, it's interesting, Fred, you know, most of these people are white. And I said, you know, that was something that was always on our minds when we were working on this book, was that we just didn't want to be like a group of white people writing about integration. And so we made a point of trying to make sure that it was inclusive, and that we told the whole story. You know, and sometimes we had to try, because a lot of people we had, you know, lost touch with. And I told Fred that it felt like, to me, at some point that maybe it mattered more to the white students now than it did to the black students. And I'm not really sure what that tells us, but you know, the white people thought that it was all about us. And we were very, very much aware. And one of the things that I learned when I was working on this book was that our black coat alumni, I guess you would call them now, were gave up just as much as we did. You know, they all had envisioned what their high school experience would be like, and we thought, oh well, it was us, you know, because that's what you do when you're part of a comparatively privileged group. You don't even know that you're privileged, and you don't even know that you're not the center of the universe. So it's real easy to think that, and the world lets you sometimes, for a while anyway. And so that's how we came about the book. We just expanded it in every direction that we could to try to create what was essentially a historical document about something momentous that we were in the throes of when we were 17 years old. And it's not about nostalgia, and it's not like a true history, but it really is just a group memoir of a very important time that happened once in Jackson, Mississippi in the 70s, and showed that people could actually get along, because I think for the most part we did, and there's a lot of lessons in that. I'm going to turn it over to Claiborne. Is that who? Claiborne wrote the introduction. He was actually Mr. Barksdale to us, and because he was our English teacher, even though he's like 2 years older than us. And then we're going to just pass it down the line, and everybody's going to offer, you know, their perspective on this. But again, we're going to try to be brief, because we really do want to hear from y'all. And if people go on too long, then by all means interrupt us, because really this is a topic that is really worthy of discussion. And I feel like if anything good comes of this, it will be to just sort of reopen a long discussion about what happened at Murrah in the 70s and what has happened in the years since. And there's a lot of food for thought in there. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Claiborne, and we'll move on down the line.
I think this works out.
All right.
That's all right. Can you hear me? I taught all of these folks, and I was 20 when that happened, and I knew even less than I know now. The book, I think, is provocative because so much of what it's about is still completely topical. My brother Jim and I were supposed to have a meeting tomorrow to talk about the effort to pass voucher legislation in the state, which is a revisiting of the very topic that this book is about. So it's not passed. It is very present, and I do look forward to the discussion about what happened, why it happened the way it did, what it meant. Was it a success or a failure? Was it a horrible mistake for the federal courts to force the merger of black and white students so massively, and the word radically is used? And those are very important and very relevant topics as we sit here today. So this is very much a discussion. This is not us up here talking. Thank you. John?
I'm a lawyer, so let's hear it for lawyers. In the summer of 2009, I read an opinion from the United States Supreme Court that just flip-flopped Brown versus Board of Education. The new majority on the Supreme Court said, well, we know what we said in 1954, but now we're not going to enforce anything that tries to overcome the historical mistreatment of black people and so forth. And it made me mad as a lawyer and as a Murrah Mustang because I thought what we went through was really valuable and tremendously important and significant, because out of a school district that only had the beginnings of token integration up until Christmas of 1969, underwent probably the most traumatic, forced I mean, crammed down one's throat, unplanned sort of a series of federal court orders saying, in 10 days, the Jackson Public Schools will completely desegregate what had been a fairly clear line drawn down the middle in Jackson, Mississippi was mashed together, and it worked. Despite the lack of planning and despite a yawning lack of leadership in this town, with the exception of William Winter. Nobody stepped up and said, guys, let's hold the course. The Jackson Public Schools have meant a lot to the white community over the years. Let's not have the most radical sort of fight or flight response and form Jackson Prep tonight. Let's hang with the system, not to criticize Jackson Prep directly, but it was formed on the night that Bailey Junior High School was desegregated and 4 or 5 buses of black students from Rowan pulled up and refused to mind a single thing that any white teacher or administrator asked them to do. From that beginning, and the same day, as I say in the book, there's one public telephone in the middle of Bailey Junior High School. If y'all went there, you may remember where the supply store was. There's one phone there, and every white girl that was in that school that I could see, and I always watched, was lined up on that telephone saying, Daddy, this desegregation thing means black people are coming, and they're here. And all that day, kids were running from Bailey out to their cars and wheeling off. And we always heard that night in the basement of the First Presbyterian Church, Jackson Prep got started. Without meeting a class or a black person or anything else, most of the people that we went to school with and had been friends with always left, and they never came back. Ever came back. We who stayed, without any plans or much leadership, except among ourselves, figured out a way to get together, because what we discovered that there was, as I say in the book, there weren't any real differences between us. The differences were the stereotypes that we learned from somebody who didn't know. And once we got to really know Robert Gibbs, or once we got to know, good Lord, Freddie Funchess, or my catcher, George Coleman, who's here, there wasn't any difference in them and anybody I knew growing up. And it was a great, eye-opening, wonderful experience. I mean that, even though I think probably I could overstate it. It was a successful experience of mashing 2 races together, and because the young people turned to each other, it worked. We had great experiences and probably have had more reunions than any other class in the history of high school. But the lesson that I learned, anyway, was that despite all the worst intentions of the grown-ups, the kids can make it work. And I learned at that point that my kids are closer to an answer than I ever was about things facing them when they were 17 years old, 18 years old. So it was a great experience, and we had a hell of a good time writing this book. But let me say this, the person who did it's this lady. It wouldn't have gotten done if the lawyers and all of the rest of us that were out there, just the lawyers, had to put it together. It was Teena that did all the heavy work. I call her the most valuable player on this team, and she clearly was. Without her, it wouldn't have come together. So this is Dr. Teena.
How about this one? A little closer? You have to turn it on. It's got a button on the side.
Hello, I'm so glad all of you came.
Oh, you got
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Glad to see so many Mustangs, and thank you for the contributions of everyone that gave to the book, and for your spouses that put up with us during this period. We started in 2009, you know, and Johnny sent an email out, and the only thing I caught on it was something ugly about the Republicans, and so I had to flash it back. And by the way, I think I'm the only Republican
No, you're not
around
the only
here.
Republican.
Up here,
No.
yeah.
You certainly are up here.
So anyway, I didn't like that, so I had to respond, and we decided we had such differing opinions that it was very interesting. And so he said, look, you write a story, and I had already written a story about that time years ago when I was a Murrah cheerleader, and all the things that I had been through and how important it was to me being a cheerleader and making friends at Murrah, making friends of different races. And so I sent mine to him, and he sent me his, and his was an amazing piece that covered history of Jackson and just the Belhaven area that I had never thought about, and he even covered some geography that I didn't know, that Bailey was a volcanic area.
Just when you were there.
Yeah, and also that area was once a mental institution, and I heard about that recently because at the dental school they were having difficulty with a parking lot because when they started to unearth the area, I think there were some graves and they had to do something about that, and that was from the mental institution. Well, anyway, so we gathered other stories. We put ads in the paper. I don't know if y'all saw the ads that I had in the Clarion Ledger. I put them in the Daily Journal and the Northside Sun to try to get everyone to participate. So this was an equal opportunity participation venture, and we tried to get all races, but just everybody to be in it. And we interviewed folks that would not send us something, and we had some great interviews. I learned from Johnny. Our first interview was with William Winter, and I was amazed at how quickly they covered so much history. William Winter is so brilliant, and so is Johnny. And so then we went and interviewed Mr. Merritt, and so Johnny talked so much of that, and I said, Johnny, why don't you let me get a word in? He said, why will, next time. So after that, I started doing my own interviews, and I learned I learned from him because I really didn't know how to interview, but he taught me. And then Alan, when we started writing, Alan taught me because he would, well, first off, I couldn't write that well when I first got started, and he corrected me and helped me do a few things. And then there were some things people said that Alan, I said, no, I don't think we should say that. And he said, Teena, it is not our job to sanitize other people's words. So that was profound. And from Claiborne Barksdale, I learned that one sentence can be more than a whole paragraph. He would always respond with these one-liners that were really interesting. What helped me was my children had gone to college, and I had an empty nest syndrome going on, and I reconnected with Jackson friends that of course I don't know if y'all know, but I live up in Houston, Mississippi, and I come to visit my folks periodically, but this was a way to get back in touch with my high school friends, and I had so much fun getting to know them again and finding out how Murrah had helped them in their lives, and it really became a very colorful, wonderful story. And thank y'all for sharing all that with us. I went to see Robert Kelly in Birmingham. I spent a day with him, and he wouldn't send me anything, so I just got in the car and drove on over there. And you'll have to read about this in here. I was going to read some things, but Alan said, no, you need to not do that because you take up too much time. But there's just some great things that
Taught her a lot.
Anyway, but I hope you liked the book, and I certainly enjoyed doing it myself, enjoyed working with Johnny and everyone. So I'm gonna let Robert Gibbs talk now.
Thank Teena. She said, I'm Robert Gibbs, and of course, I bring a different perspective. I'm not an author, but I was interviewed several times about the book. And I've had the distinct pleasure over the last 25 or so years of being interviewed about integration at Murrah. And it was a difficult experience, even though I think it ultimately worked. But from the black community, what I try to get people to realize is that we had to give up a whole lot to come to Murrah. We were used to how we did things, our culture, our music, our dancing, just how we handled everything. Yet we were taken from our neighborhoods, from our schools, to integrate into a different culture. I often have given the example, and I'm sure you probably have heard it, that I was in the band over at Brinkley. And we were playing songs by James Brown, and we were dancing on the football field. Came to Murrah, and white students couldn't dance. Just telling the truth. And so for us to play those type songs were prohibited. So again, I remember one band performance where our band director, Mr. Dollarhide, had put together where it was the Good Ship Lollipop.
Funky good ship lollipop. The bad ship lollipop.
So you can imagine the culture shock for those of us who had to go from side to side to the Good Ship Lollipop. But I often thought about the fact, what would have happened had the white students had to come over to Brinkley and had to learn to do the popcorn. I'm not sure it would have worked. So we gave up, I think, a lot. And we also had to deal with a lot of teachers who, in my opinion, felt that we couldn't learn. And we had to demonstrate to them that, not only could we learn, we could do extremely well. And we could make the A's, and we could be leaders in the school. And I think when the number of black students start being more than the number of white students, then some rules got changed. There had been one president of the student body, but then they changed the co-presidents. I always felt that they changed the co-president so that a black person would not be the sole president of the student body. And it was just those type of subtle things that I'm not sure people knew how some of the black students were feeling while we were trying to integrate into the Murrah culture. Now, let me say, I learned a lot of Murrah. And I've had a fairly decent career since I left Murrah. So I believe that it was a great opportunity for us to learn how different people react, how they act. And I go into the schools a lot as a mentor. And the thing I would tell you is that you guys have deserted our public schools. The thing that they did back in the 1970s to bring us together has more separated us today. When I go into the schools to speak or to talk to students, I'm talking to all black students. There's very few white students in our public schools today. I think this book hopefully will be something that will open all our eyes, tell us that we got to continue to support our public schools. Our public schools were good to all of us. We're all successful now because of the education we got. And I just hope that this book would let us know that one of the best things that happened was that we learned how other people who were different from us acted, and that we could be their friends and we could be lifelong friends. Jenny and I, Cleveland and I see them on a regular basis, and that's because we knew each other back then. We developed a relationship, and that relationship has carried forward. Thank you.
That's what we have to say. I would like to add one thing because to what Robert said, because one of the ways that I think that as white students we didn't realize what was going on was when we had to vote for those dual everything. We had to vote for, a beauty and whatever. You had to vote for two, a black and a white. And we thought that was us being magnanimous, that we were going to incorporate them into our world. And in fact, and that was I think I persisted in thinking that until we started working on this book. And somebody pointed out, that told us that y'all were still in charge, even though you were the minority, because they would have all been black if we hadn't voted for two of everything. And so we're still learning about the experience that we went through that we kind of thought we actually knew about. So anyway, that's what the book is about, and what we'd really like to do now is hear what questions y'all have. And if you have someone specific that you want to direct it to, or a comment that you heard that you want to address, please just let us know. Yes?
What was the ratio white to black at that time?
It was around 60-40, black to white.
65% black, 35% white. Our senior year.
Whereas, Jim, when I graduated in '68, out of 335 students, I think we had 5 African American students in the class under freedom of choice.
Let me say this about Brinkley. I see a lot of fellow Brinkley 10th grade vets out there. Got these here. What the Fifth Circuit did after the first semester of radical desegregation was go further. I mean, we'd already lost 2/3 of the white kids we'd grown up with, gone to Jackson Prep and the Citizens Council schools, which really did open up in trailers and, I don't know, metal buildings and stuff. Alan went there, he'll tell you about that, but in the, for a year, I think Teena was Miss Council School, 10th grade, 11th grade,
I went there 2 months.
2 months.
And at the end of the 9th grade, after having gone to Rowan to begin with.
Right, that's right. Anyway, what the Fifth Circuit did in the summer of 1970 was say, all right, one more step, we're going to make Murrah 11th and 12th grade, 10th graders heading to Murrah and heading to Callaway will go to Brinkley. The Fifth Circuit's opinion, I put this in the book for those that have nothing else to do, bored enough to read about these court orders, because I thought it was interesting. What the Fifth Circuit was projecting in the summer of 1970 was that Brinkley would have 507 whites and 480-something black people. When we showed up there the first day, and we didn't even know where the school was, so we had to go find it. 681 black people and 83 white people. And we made it through the whole year, and it was in a part of town that really, it was just in the northwest quadrant of Jackson, where the black community has generally been. We found a community that we had no idea even existed. We heard from Robert and other people that we interviewed that was a community for the black educators. That was the community. It was really as much a community and as cohesive as Bella or Leftover where I live. And we got over there and we found out that it was a whole different world that we learned more from. I don't know how much I learned academically except how to type. But it was a great experience for those of us who went. And what happened though, as Robert was saying, Brinkley was the top performing black high school in the state and had been for years. The best black high school in the state, completely sacrificed to radical desegregation. Brinkley's now a junior high school. Brinkley never came back. When integration hit, it had won the state basketball championship the year before, and I don't know if y'all care about sports. I do. And had Orsman Jordan and some of the greatest athletes ever come out of Jackson. They completely destroyed that school, folded the uniforms up, put them in boxes, and their trophies, and packed them away. And as I say in the book, I told the catcher on the baseball team, George Coleman, if he's here, at the 10th year reunion, George told me we didn't want to go to Murrah more than y'all didn't want to go to Brinkley. I thought about that a minute, and I said, golly. And I went to him at the end of the reunion and said, here I was thinking the entire time that we're the ones that gave up everything. that we're the ones that sacrificed to let black people have the honor of being in our presence in school. When what happened in desegregation actually was it destroyed the best performing high school, and all those black kids had the same expectations about being Brinkley Eagles that my friends and I had about being Murrah Mustangs when we were following that football team, those great teams. And it was something that we completely forgot. So I chased George down at the end of the reunion and said, that's not only racist, I just committed, that's the meaning of racism. To think that y'all were the only ones that y'all only stood to benefit and we only stood to lose. And we learned that from each other. And I don't know any other way I would have learned that. It was a great lesson.
Could y'all in the back be quiet? Someone raise
says
their
be
hand
quiet.
if they can hear me?
Mr. Barstow says be quiet.
I don't know where but I think it's on the outside and they don't realize that it's projecting.
Well, maybe we could try.
Maybe somebody that's back there can tell them. I hate to shout any louder to the microphone. Okay, anybody else have a question in the meantime about any of this? Come on, yeah.
What about the teachers that were there? Did they integrate the faculties? How was that handled?
Yes, they did. And I mean, some of the teachers, you look like you have something to say about that. Some of the teachers were holdouts from the previous, administration that were, in a few cases, just holding out for retirement, I think. And
Standing up at the back.
Miss Jackson.
Miss Jackson, let
Yes.
you answer. Miss Jackson is the best. Her name is Mary Jackson, but she's Miss Jackson to us, and she was the best math teacher in the world. I hated math, and I loved her class. She was wonderful. So thank you so much for coming. And yeah, you should talk. Why don't you come up? Would you mind, or you? I don't
You don't have to
remember
come
you
up.
having any problem holding forward.
Get signatures. I have your help.
Okay. This is.
She was best, yes.
I need signatures.
We'll do that.
Original.
It's a trade.
Hello.
You're gonna have to-
Oh, sorry, I'm not used to speaking
Well, it's
into an
not real
item.
sensitive. You have to speak closely.
But my perspective obviously is a bit different because I was looking at the situation as an adult. These were young people who had no idea what was happening with them. Even in going through it, they didn't realize what great examples they were of what humankind can be when it chooses to be. It was the most wonderful experience for me because I was a young teacher at the time. And I want to tell you, first of all, I am so proud of what you've done here. I am so proud that now people know, they have a perspective on what was happening during those years that they did not have before. It was not an easy experience, but it was so worthwhile. It was so rewarding. Every time I see them, I remember how much I adored these young people because they made the effort. In spite of the difficulty, they made the effort to reach across the aisle to each other. And I saw wonderful, as you can see, wonderful friendships develop over the years. I also have to say on behalf of that staff at Murrah, I came from Lanier. We were so welcomed. Everybody was apprehensive, but we were so welcome into that staff. We were able to set examples, I think, in the way we behaved for our young people. And so again, thank you for that wonderful experience.
Thank you.
Alan is giving me the mic. Don't give a mic to a lawyer. I'm not talking to him. Other questions? There's a question, yes.
That's a very compelling title that y'all came up with, Lives Were Drunk. That's so compelling. I wonder, can we reach a consensus that the first line that was drawn was not by the court, who was not in touch with reality, our reality, but the first line that was drawn by the generations of white Mississippians before us,
Absolutely.
who are not in touch with reality, and who you know, John Satterfield represented the state of Mississippi before the court, and he was an avowed segregationist, and the state of Mississippi would not have sent anything other than that to represent us. And that precipitated something that was radical, that could not happen any other way, because of the entrenchment, the absolute entrenchment of segregation in our state. In my county, all the county highways are wiggly, and of them are straight. They're all paved. And I asked, why are they so crooked? And they said, because while he was still governor, Ross Barnett made sure that these roads got paved so that kids could get to the academy that he was going to be sure was established in Madden, Mississippi. I mean, it's not like there was going to be any kind of rapport or cooperation, biological discussion that could have come to an outcome less precipitous. And therefore it was indeed, I mean, it was precipitous for everybody. So of all the lines that were drawn, the first one was drawn real close to home, is my sense.
I'm going to say this because he's here. Jim Child is a kind of a old lawyer. But, very good. One of the best examples. He can't stand up, so I'll show it. And one of the best examples I know of what I try to be as an honorable lawyer, he truly is. He told me when we were doing this book that he got together with Melvin Leventhal, who was here with Fred Banks and Reuben Anderson. Leventhal is a brilliant lawyer from New York and working on the case that ultimately led to all the orders that affected us, the Singleton versus Jackson Municipal Separate School District case. And Jimmy said that he and Leventhal got together with John Jenkins, who was the dean of the cathedral at St. Andrews, who was also a major influence to those of us that ever heard him, especially talking about black people. Went to the lawyers that were representing the state right in the middle of all this and said, can't we settle this? Every time we force the court to do something, it's more intrusive, it's more radical. Jimmy said, telling the lawyer who shall remain nameless with the Butler Snow Canada firm, and said, can't we settle it? Every time we force the court to take the next step, it's even more intrusive, it's even more radical. And the lawyer told Jimmy Child and Melvin Leventhal and Dean Jenkins, we can't settle this. How would we look settling this case, giving up on segregation?
He said, not the first child.
Not the first child.
Not the first black child.
This is the lawyer from the state. We'll fight this. Oh, not the first black child will set foot in Murrah High School.
So what year was that?
1970?
Yeah.
The summer before they, September of this fall. We went down to Mel Leventhal's office and, just said, isn't there some way? He said, of course there is. We'd be more than happy to resolve this matter. And when we went to the school board and the lawyer, they said, never, not the first.
To defend the Fifth Circuit, shut up, but you got to remember that 15 years had passed since Brown versus Ford, with no steps to accommodate what the court said was a fundamental violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. We couldn't continue to be segregated like this. It was only 15 years, and what we had, if y'all remember growing up, was 2 or 3 or 4 black kids in our classes. We hadn't taken the steps.
Okay, can I say something? Just to clarify for the record about the lines being drawn, when you go to the book, you'll see pictures that were from the Clarion Ledger of where the federal courts drew lines which told us where to go to school. And there's a couple places in the book where it also said, makes references to lines that were drawn. Johnny was interviewing Winter, and he says, were there people back then, Governor, that would have gone to the streets with guns to fight over that? Winter, no question about it. That is what some members of the legislature were doing. There was no compromise. A line had been drawn in the sand. Not just in the sand, but on the concrete of the roads leading to a school that was going to be integrated, figuratively. And then Robert gives, this is actually where the title came from. Robert said, and where the lines were drawn at my house, I ended up at Murrah. My daughter was looking at that. She was reading through some of the essays, and she said, Mama, that's the name of your book. So it's actually Hillary Horn that came up with the lines were drawn. And we fought for that title. Some folks tried to change it, but we thought that was a good one because it covered a lot of different lines.
I think the solid line was drawn by Governor Ross Barnett in his statement that Mississippi schools will never be segregated, will never be integrated. And that has remained the mantra of the state legislature for all these years. I didn't go to Murrah. I'm Catholic and I finished at Holy Ghost. But I have spoken with public school teachers across the country. I lived in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. You know what happened to them in the 70s. Black teachers suffered enormously. There may have been individual cases where everything was fine and everybody treated them well, but in fact, the black teachers who went into white schools were demeaned, overlooked, and in some cases physically assaulted. Gently, not so blood would be drawn. My sister and brother went to Berkeley. I have friends who went to Lemuria. Proud traditions that are lost. And you can have a Murrah reunion and be proud of that. But those students cannot have a real reunion. The totems and signposts of black education, which was excellent, even in segregation, I have to say, their signposts are gone. There is no memorial plaque. We studied here. The privileged children are still privileged adults. And I would ask that you be empathetic for the fact that all black parents wanted was for a quality public education. If it could have been achieved without integration, they would have been more than happy. But we did not have that. It's about education. And Mississippi still refuses to this day to provide a quality public education.
Well, I don't think that's true in every town, because in the book I say that my children went to public schools in Houston, Mississippi from kindergarten to the 12th grade, and they got an excellent education. It was all races, not just black and white, but all races, Hispanic, folks from other countries too. So Mississippi does provide it
We can agree to
in different
disagree.
places.
Okay, Teena? Okay, speaking of education, obviously I'm not a Murrah graduate, but I am the mother of 3 1970s graduates. The education at Murrah was one of the things that people withdrew their children because of. They said they can't get a good education there. They can't get a good education there. There aren't good teachers left there. Okay, so, you know. Another reason was that, and I hate to say this, but several of them were there, children were there because their parents couldn't afford private students. Well, let's talk about the education. The teachers at Murrah were excellent. And they were black and white, and they were excellent. My children, a lot of you, have gone on to fabulous careers, wonderful situations all over the country. That was just a false statement. And Ms. Jackson, Ms. Prater, as well as Ms. Trammell, Clay Barksdale, on and on and on. The teachers at Murrah were good, and the children there got a good education, whether they were black or white. So let's just clear that little misunderstanding of that.
That's right. Thank you. Well, I think, why is it that before anything happened, out of the, how many were supposed to go to Brinkley? 507. 83 showed up. I mean, they didn't even give it a chance. They fled in the night. I was talking to my friend Andy Mullins, who knows a lot about public education in Mississippi, okay? The difference between Jackson, Mississippi and Tupelo, Mississippi, or for a long time Meridian, Mississippi, or Oxford, Mississippi, was the absence of leadership, which Johnny talked about in Jackson, Mississippi. Because it was a success in a lot of places in Mississippi, and to this day, you have equally balanced school districts that are succeeding, but it was not a success in Jackson, if only from the sociological sense of it, because as we speak, Murrah High School is about 98% African American. Very few white kids go there, and that to me, again, as I said earlier, that's the real provocative thing about the book. Was it a mistake? Was it a failure? Was it worth the effort? Could it have been done better? Would it have been wiser to have done it more gradually? As somebody said, if you'd done it, Jim, I think you said this, Matheny, it wouldn't have happened. It had to be forced. It probably could have been timed a lot better rather than in 2 weeks you've got to come up with a plan. I cannot imagine doing that and having it come off smoothly. But I think it's a very complicated question, obviously. That's why it's still a question.
And let me say this too. I think perception also was at Murrah when the black students got there. And I said this earlier. I believe that a lot of the white teachers did not think black students could learn. Yet when we went to black schools with all black teachers, those teachers had a connection with our parents. If I didn't get it at school, they was going to call my mom and my dad and believe that I would have had it the next day because I would have got something at home that night. So when I got to Murrah, I was overly prepared to deal with whatever that was thrown at me. And I do think that there were some white teachers there, and I talk about it in some of the things I said in my part of the book. I think there were some teachers there that just could not believe that these black students could learn. And yet when they gave us tests, and we were scoring as well as the white students, it opened some eyes. And I think those eyes needed to be opened, because if those eyes had never been opened, some of the teachers would have gone to their grave believing that black people were not as smart as white people. So I want to say we got a great education in the black schools, and I was one of those ones that did not want to move. I say in the book too, it was something about Brinkley that seemed like I never could get there. Brinkley started off on Bailey Avenue, and in 1966, when I was about to go to Brinkley, it moved to Albemarle Road. And then it moved from Albemarle Road, no, it moved to Livingston Road. It was on Livingston Road. By the time I got to go to Livingston Road, they changed it to Powell. And then they moved it to Albemarle. So by the time I got to Albemarle, I got to go to Brinkley 1 year, and then I was told I had to go to Murrah. So that tradition of the great basketball teams, the great basketball players, the great football teams that I was looking forward to, being in the band, to be able to one day be the captain of the drum section in the band. I didn't get to do that. Now, I wasn't captain in Murrah. I was pretty good. But I didn't get to do it at Brinkley. And that's what I said before. We had to learn to integrate. And I think we had to be smarter than anybody could give us credit for, to leave a culture that had already been, that we was related to change cultures and still succeed.
Foster.
Yeah. I hear a lot about, you know, how this process, well, I won't say it that way, that there was, the results had a lot of success because of the relationship that developed and things that we learned. But I don't want anybody to go away from here for a minute thinking that I think the process was anything but the draconian catastrophe. Because it was a train wreck. You had all these white students that you forced over a 2-week period to get on a train and run it into Brinkley and they'd get off. And you took the black students from their community, which was Brinkley, and put them on a train and ran them into Murrah and said, okay, get off. And that is the worst possible scenario to try to make integration successful. That may have been, at the time, the only way it could have done with that narrow window of court-ordered legal battles. I'm not placing blame. I'm not talking about the blame. I'm talking about the process. If anybody to come away from here and think that was a way to do it, or that was an acceptable way to do it, I think that's just a travesty. Because if we don't agree to that, it can happen again. There had to have been, out of 100 ways, 99 would have been better of trying to accomplish integration and whatever possible results you want to do for that. So that's, I think if you take kids, like I say, it's a natural catastrophe. You take kids and you put them in a natural catastrophe, they'll figure out a way to make it work. But that doesn't mean you should put them in a natural catastrophe to make it work. And that's what, this was a man-made catastrophe. So that's the process, and that was the point I wanted to make.
We covered that in our book at first, and we talked about Murrah the last 2 years that we were there being a great education, but it was terrible at first. I mean, in my opinion, and my opinions are in the book, so get the book and read it. But for some of us, it was awful. We got hurt, we got knocked around. But, you know, those of us that stayed the course made it through, and we found a deeper meaning and deeper relationship with folks. But he's right, at first it was not good.
I have a question about the present and the future. As a non-Mississippian, it's been very enlightening to hear the comments of you and the people in the audience. Immediately, shortly before my wife, a native Mississippian, and I moved here, we were in Oregon, and we told a person we were moving to Mississippi, and there was a one-word response. Why? Mississippi does not enjoy a positive reputation throughout the United States.
No.
Really?
And I am a retired lawyer. But my question is really this, and my perception. After coming here, I wanted to pay back. I wanted to give back. I wanted to teach English. I taught. I got the certificate at Belhaven through that program. I had very difficulty communicating with my students. Many of, I would say, 99.9% of whom were black. This is in 8th grade. I was the 8th teacher that year for that class.
Where?
Crystal Springs Middle School. They had run all the prior teachers off. They, being a group of 136 students, one young woman had been in the class for 4 years. It has a ranking of 2. It did when I taught there, and it still has a 2 ranking on this scale. But my question is this: how long can Mississippi afford to ignore public education? And there's a cost, a burden that the expense of educating all your children in private school as well as college is an immense external cost. And is there any means by which there's any possibility of developing a multi-racial set of pupils who attend the public schools in the state of Mississippi? Is that even possible?
Let me give you a couple of statistics. 91% of all children in Mississippi go to the public schools. 80% of white children in Mississippi go to the public schools. So the conversation is dominated by the vast majority of wealth. I haven't looked at any statistics about that, but I think that's an enlightening and significant fact.
You know, we've always said in
Ms. Jackson.
Okay.
Just one general comment. As I listen to the conversation, I am always reminded of the problems associated with generalization.
Yeah.
And that's what we're tending to do here. Our conversation, case by case and school by school, situations were very different. We tended to put them all in one category. Either integration was all bad, or it was all good for some of us, and actually it was a mixture, as all things are. I do agree with this gentleman. I think having the courts come in and have to do that was probably the worst possible way to do this. Doing it in 2 weeks, and I lived through that also, was the worst possible way to do it, but I don't know that we could have done it any differently because we were like the current Congress of the United States. We couldn't find a way to compromise with each other, so it had to be done, and we're better for it in these days.
Thank you.
And we got beyond being together 3.5 years every day. We finally got beyond knowing each other just through generalizations. That was the best thing about it. You had to learn about each other individually.
Freddie Bunches just walked in.
Oh,
Hey,
my
Freddie.
goodness.
I want to read y'all something. Freddie Bunches became very good friends with Charles Irving. Is Charles here? Hey, Charles. We talked about Charles in there. Charles had the nerve to take Bunches to Eastover. And he took our whole class to Eastover, as a matter of fact, when there weren't any mixture of races at that point. And so Charles Irving and Freddie Bunches just broke the mold. Freddie said that Charles said, he told me one time the thing to realize in life, regardless of what you do or how you do it, you still have to deal with certain people at a particular time, and by prolonging it was going to make it even longer to have to deal with. So get tossed over in the salad. Toss it up and make it happen. And that's why the Irby business was so successful, because they knew how to deal with people, not isolating themselves from different things. So kudos to Freddie and Charles.
Y'all, I'd like to represent modern Murrah. I'm Greg Howell. I graduated from Murrah in '91. I'm in the index, by the way. I've been teaching at Murrah since '99. I am at Murrah right now, former teacher of mine. And I'd like to say, when I first started teaching in '99, Miss Hardy was there, Mr. Barfield was there, and folks ask me about teaching Murrah, and I'll tell them I can't imagine teaching anywhere else. I had a student who graduated a year ago or so, and she ran into her and she said, Miss Powell's quiet out here in class. Now I teach juniors male. I teach AP biology. AP kids are a cut above. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. A cut above some other folks, you know. So I'm skewed to that level of kids at Murrah. But that level of kids at Murrah, those people, I told folks that, I said, those are my type of people. They're your type of people. If you were to meet them, you would instantly have this bond with them. You would instantly feel comfortable with them. So I just want to put in my kids are going to go tomorrow. All the teachers, They're teaching at Murrah. They live in Jackson. Their kids go to Murrah. Principal's kids go to Murrah. And among a number of the faculty there, we have this understanding that you're not allowed to retire until our kids have passed through Murrah. And then we're allowed to retire.
Thank you. Yeah. Jim Phillips.
In your book, I haven't finished it, but what would have been the damages if the courts had allowed the JPS board to integrate during the summer of 1970 versus just 2 weeks, and I was there, and I will say I don't believe we had any trouble between anybody. We had a better maybe track team, and we had, but it was we took the rest of the year off as seniors, really did. And Miss Jackson, I had her, and she was the best. She was much improvement on my teacher before integration. At math, I slept through both of them.
I think, well, we say this in the book, but a little more time would have been a lot better. The problem was, I think that the intrusiveness of it, in 10 days you'll have to go to a school you've never even seen before, really did trigger the fight or flight response in most white people. And most fled. They didn't give it a chance. You know, for whatever reasons, it was too much too soon. I don't think anybody, Foster was saying that, but the problem is, how much longer were black people going to have to wait to have integration? Because the truth is, it had been the law for 15 years, and the Fifth Circuit finally said, enough. How are we going, we've tried everything else, freedom of choice, token integration. I mean, as I said in the book, I don't know if the shoe were on the other foot, if white people would have waited 15 years to have their constitutional rights vindicated that they have by reason of just being a citizen. Well, so I don't know that there was a graceful, gradual way to do it, but somebody should have and you're asking a court to enforce constitutional rights, not to play politics. And the court wasn't in the position to say, okay, we're going to enforce the Equal Protection Clause for, you know, half the people today and then the other half in 6 months. It just doesn't work that way. But it was, if you want to get into it, it's really interesting the way that the law really stepped into this void and tried to answer a question. It was too radical, but the court was asked, what does the Constitution say about these rights? And they don't say the Constitution says in 6 months we're going to enforce it. Yes.
As crazy as it was, I think it worked. My husband graduated from high school in Baton Rouge, and y'all may or may not know that they tied it up into law courts for like 30 years. So it finally came about, and then all hell broke loose because they've been fighting it for so long. And we were over here thinking, what's the big deal? We've come and gone. So when we went to the class reunion this year, he said, I cannot believe how awesome your class is. So you really were friends. I mean, you really like these people. I said, well, yeah, we didn't know that we weren't supposed to. And I think that had a really strong impact.
Foster, somebody, Sybil, you have a question.
Somebody else has got a burning question.
Sybil had a question.
I just wanted to say that to me the nagging question is, why did integration have a negative effect on the historically black schools? Like she talked about Lemuria and Griffin being such fine schools that today seem to have disintegrated, or am I wrong? And why is that?
Yeah. Well, truth is, I don't think that they did. What happened in Jackson, I think, is you've got Northwest Rankin, you've got Madison Central, full of people that should have gone to Murrah High School. I mean, and they're some of the best public schools in this state. The problem was white flight worked. The best response to radical desegregation was white flight for white people, and it was perfectly legal. In fact, in '74, the Supreme Court said, if you're worried about it, move out. And it unfortunately worked. It created good schools in the path of fleeing Jacksonians, but they're still, I don't think it's, I think that they're still really good black high schools, and Murrah's a good example of it.
Charles, Irby, and Freddie, why don't y'all come up here a minute?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, these are two buddies now that need to teach Jackson something. I think we're being filmed here, so we're gonna let y'all teach Jackson about friendship.
I don't know.
Stand up here and talk about your friendship with you and Freddie. Your lifetime friendship here.
Freddie, you've always been better at talking, so you better.
Well, I've been put on the spot. You know, when Charles and I first met with y'all, I've been hearing a lot of people saying a lot of things. But I'm glad it's time for the students who attended Murrah that actually experienced that, and not the ones that didn't. We met over drinking, and you know, we talking about a rich kid and a kid that's whatever you want to call was that. But see, God had an intention that a lot of us didn't understand. God don't see color, God see people. And when he and I met, I mean, after Wide Blue Yonder, we was sitting, we was talking, and all of a sudden, we just got together and just started talking. And that's what's going on with the world today. You can't assume anything about anybody that you don't know. We gave each other a chance. We still talking about somebody that lived over there in Eastover that took me to a restaurant over there where nobody would have went there. And I walked up in there and Charles told me, you better sit over there and eat whatever you want to eat. But he still was this person that, I had 2 sons that passed away. And Charles came over. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going on, but I know one thing. This man was generally concerned. He called me, he said, well, Freddie, I heard one of your sons passed away. Can we go out to dinner? I said, well, yeah, man, come on over, let's go out to dinner. We went out to dinner, and he was genuinely concerned about me as a person. Not as a colored person, but as a person. And that's what generally, for me, that caught me with him. I went over to his house. We was in the Corvette one day going down Lake of the Drive. I told him, Charles, we are not on the Indianapolis 500. And he said, okay, well, I'm a Florida. Hey, Charles. But to make a long story short, I heard somebody say, and I think it was Miss Jackson. She might be gone, I don't know. It did work. Linda Stevenson, Kip Ezel, George Coleman, all of these kids around here that went to school with us. And if I don't call your name, please don't look down on me because, you know, all of you all was a part of Murrah at that time. And I don't know nobody else's experience because we was only asked in the book our experience, not yours. It was ours. And they asked our opinion, not yours. It might not have been yours, what I said, but guess what? He asked me, not you. And see, that's what we need to understand. That this guy right here just as close to me than anybody else is. No one called me on that mishap about my son, but Charles. He and I have been together for years. We called each other. He's up in Nashville riding on a horse playing polo. Hey, but that's my buddy. That's my buddy. And I told him one day, and I'm gonna let him have the microphone. I told him one day, I said, Charles, you know what? Friends don't have to be people who talk to each other every day or be around each other every day, because we all have families. We got different professionals that we go in. But if we can call each other one day out of the wide blue yonder and we can catch back on where we were and what we was doing at that time, that's what friendship is all about. And that's why I love him. I love Linda Stevenson, Kip Ezel, and all the rest of the students that I didn't name. Johnny, my buddy here. Come on with me, man. Mr. Gill. Hey, Mr. Barksdale. I think you were 2 years older than me. No, I'm just joking. But this is why we're here today. It's because of what happened back then. And the results is 42 years later, and we're still here. And I love it.
I should have gone first, because I told you Freddie was a great speaker. You know, Freddie came to see me when my brother died. This is back in 2012. And he told my pastor from First Pres this story. And my old Ligon Duncan's eyes are about this big. And it had to do with that fella in that Mr. Shelton's class. Yeah. I'm not going to tell the story, but...
Yeah, don't tell it. We'll talk about the present.
Well, this white student in our class said something to the black teacher that was inappropriate. And he ended up going to the bathroom, and I went in after him. And if I didn't know this, I'd forgotten that Freddie had come in after me. And Freddie and I were in there arguing, who's going to whoop him? And I won because I said, you can't do it because of your race. And Freddie agreed, and his size too. And I won't finish the story, but that was an interesting bonding time for Freddie and me. And Freddie and I really became good friends and are good friends, and well after high school. And I've had so many relationships. You know, I've kept up, not the last probably 7 or 8 years, but with Fred Sheriff. You know, he came out to SMU, I won't say with me. He was the valedictorian, I was the, you know, hardly dictorian, so to speak. And we went out to SMU together and became friendly. But Freddie has been just a close friend. And I think one thing Freddie said that really touched my heart is, how can you have an opinion about somebody you don't know? And I think that's a sweet message. I think it's a biblical message. I think it's a psychological, relational, sociological message, political message, whatever you want to say. But we've got to get to know each other and talk respectfully to each other. And that transcends beyond race. It can be political parties or areas of the country. And then I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Thank you all. That was who else? Anybody else have a question? Yeah, you've got a question.
I'm one of the few from the class of '75, and we went from 7th grade through 12th, most of us, and there are a few of us here. And Bob and I, hi Rich, and Bob and I, Fagan, when we were talking about this earlier. And Robert, this is kind of my question for you because I talked to you about it. This is a great book. Couldn't put it down. I thought it was extremely well put together. I halfway expected it to be kind of dry reading. It was not. And my question to you is, I want to hear from the black community. And I know that there are a few in here, but there aren't many. And I would love to see a follow-up, maybe a sequel to this, hearing from the other side. That's just my question.
And when we was having the discussion, I was telling her, when I saw the article in the paper Sunday, several of my high school classmates, I decided needed to know about the book. Some of you may remember Wyatt Washington, who was the quarterback of the football team, and Billy Joe Shelton, who was the co-president, the black co-president in 1972. But we stay in touch with each other. When they read the article in the newspaper, the first thing they said to me was, we have to tell the rest of the story. So maybe another book.
No. Oh, somebody has a question?
Yeah, my name is Reginald Ritchie.
Hey.
Hey, Reginald.
I have a different perspective of the whole integration piece because I was probably one of the few black kids that were at white schools in the city. And so my parents made a choice to send me over there. Now, I didn't want to go over there, I will admit. But they felt in other neighbors that we needed to, because the opportunity was there, we should make ourselves available for it. And the fact that my mom taught at Brinkley, my dad taught at Lanier, and they didn't want me to go to school with them being teachers there, even though it ended up happening. And most of you know my mom was a hard teacher, so I didn't have to her anyway. But I just want to say that it was not a negative experience for me in the 60s, being in a majority white school. And I think the reason it wasn't was because there were core families, the Winters, the Cobbs, the Stevens, I got the Sanders, you know, the Irbies. There were families that made sure that they did the right thing at home, so their kids did the right thing at school. And I tell people all the time, so-and-so, and you know, Mary Allen was here, and I feel like I grew up at 5476 River Teena. I still know that address. Tommy was my best friend. Everybody knows it. And I think it comes from the parents. There were some good parents who say that you need to do the right thing, even though everybody may not feel that way. So I just want to point that out because people think all this negativity about Mississippi. I just want to say that when you didn't have to be nice to me, you were. I just want to say that.
Me? Yeah. I just want to give a perspective because I found it really unique when I moved to Mississippi in 1972. Matter of fact, when my parents said we're moving from North Carolina to Mississippi, I went, oh dear God, please no. But they moved into the Murrah School District for a reason. It was the best school. They had the Murrah singers. I was really coming back from a vocal background. I walk in, I hear this girl playing a guitar at some pep rally, fix 'em up thing. Came around the corner, and there's this black girl playing the guitar. And I went, wow, she's great. She sounded like a Joni Mitchell with a little bit of soul, and that was Cassandra. And Cassandra and I began to sing together, and Jack Ritter, all three of us sang together. And it was just some of those things that when I was coming from North Carolina, where it seemed like integration worked, because the administration really wanted the students to work. And I walked into Murrah, and I didn't feel that from the administration, but it was the people. It was Teena, and it was, it's just so many people that made it work because the students wanted to make it work. And I think it's because of those relationships that it changed my perspective towards Mississippi. And I swore I was going to go back to North Carolina the day I graduated, and that was 40 some odd years. But I guess the lesson that I feel like that is lost to other generations is that, you know, it really took the individuals to get together and to become friends and to know who each other were. And I think we've lost that. It changed our lives in that period of time. And I don't see the opportunities to change lives in the public schools like it was. We have to find other areas, our jobs, our social life, our sports, there's all these other ways of interacting. But I appreciate that time. I love the book. I think it's spot on. I agree. I would like to see a follow-up book. I don't know, call it The Other Side of the Track. I don't know. But, I definitely would like to hear The Other Side.
Here's a follow-up. You know, I think that if Jackson were to read this book and see what we lived through and how we became friends and bonded, and would have the courage to walk back to the public schools and have the parents support the public schools, support each other as a community. That's what we do in our little small town. The parents support the school, and we all cheer for the team, just like, you know, we had great spirit at Murrah. But you know, maybe this would be a way for Jackson to grow. You know, just this is a little seed planted, so perhaps a tree will grow from it, you know. So.
Yeah. I think we've actually gotten out of our regularly scheduled program. So, and I'm sure y'all have been very patient. And if anyone wants to talk further, we'll all be around. So, you know, thank you for coming and particularly for participating.